Hi everyone, I'm Les,
And I'm Ashley.
and you're listening to Anthropotamus, where we explore some of your favorite anthropology topics.
Hey everyone, today we are discussing ADHD, A Hunter in a Farmer's World by Thom Hartmann. I actually really enjoyed this book. What about you, Les?
Oh, thoroughly. I actually learned quite a bit from it. More than that, I started to view it in a very different way.
ADHD?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we constantly grow up being thought of as ADHD as a disorder, whereas this book discusses it as this community that we're brought up in isn't set up for those of us who do have ADHD. And I did have a quote here that I wanted to pull out from chapter 1, where it's not at all a malfunction. To the contrary, it's a coherent, functioning response to a different kind of world and society than that in which most of us live. So I like that. I like that. It's not that we are incapable of learning things. We just learn things differently.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely makes sense as well, just because if you think about the way people and societies have adapted over time, you try different things, and as whatever works keeps working, it continues on. Society being different now, you'll see a lot of things that we just haven't had time to adapt yet.
Something also before we move on is he does mention that males are much more likely to get diagnosed than females, and this is often thought that men are more likely to have ADHD, but is it really that men are more likely to have it, or that society's upbringing of women or young girls were just perceived differently and taught to behave differently, so that symptoms often are ignored? So, for example, young boys bouncing off the wall, he can't focus, he must have ADHD. Whereas for myself growing up, I couldn't focus, but nobody knew that because I would sit quietly and daydream all day. Much more easy. It's much more easy to ignore the young girl daydreaming she's Xena, warrior princess, than it is to ignore the young boy who's, throwing pencils at the kid in front of him.
You expect boys to be rowdy, and you expect boys to do things, get caught getting in trouble, stuff like that, and it doesn't stand out when that happens. But for me and my brothers, I know growing up we always had issues in class. My brother was diagnosed with ADHD. I was not. Later years, I've noticed that I have quite a few of the symptoms, especially after reading this book and actually having a little bit of information presented to me.
So, I mean, like I brought up, I really love this new perception on ADHD. I remember, this isn't so common now, I feel like, but several years ago, I remember always seeing articles about how, your children watching too much TV as infants will cause ADHD. And I'm like, well, I was a latchkey kid. I spent most of my childhood at home watching TV. Is that why I have ADHD? But it really gives you this new perception, and it made me think about, family history. What are some behaviors that my family demonstrated? Is it possible I got it from my great grandmother or something? So I really like this, and I think that this new I don't want to say it's a new stance on ADHD, but this what I also like about this is going at it as a new perspective, not as a disorder, but as a different way of perceiving the world, is a great way to present it to your child. So definitely if your child has ADHD, this is definitely a book I would recommend, because I would imagine it's not good growing up being told there's something wrong with you. You don't want to tell your child there's something wrong with you. You just want to tell them you think differently. We're going to find a new way to learn.
This is your reality, and we have to react to that reality a little bit differently. Just like somebody who has a problems walking. Well, they have problems walking. So what's their reality, right? They have to react to that. They have to really just live with that. And the thing about ADHD is because it's such a hidden thing, like you don't see it evidently. Most people just perceive it as, you're distractible or this or that. And you're told that it's a disorder that you can't do anything about, while the rest of the public disbelieves the fact that it's happened to you or anything is wrong.
Right. Or you just need to focus more.
Exactly. Like, well, I can tell you what.
Why hadn't I thought of that?
Yeah. This would solve your problem right here if you just pay attention.
Kind of getting us back onto the whole. I mean, this is the anthropology podcast. But moving back to that, he does bring up how we perceive normal quotation marks people to be, and the origins of agriculture, and how these establishment agriculture benefit those who do not have ADHD, and this sedentary lifestyle benefit them. And
specifically, it was something about them being able to see the value in future gains rather than momentary gains.
Right.
So the farmer being able to sit on the, their crops and making sure that nothing came in and tore them up, or birds, or whether it be birds or anything else like that, versus somebody
being on the hunt.
Yeah, somebody with ADHD wouldn't be able to do that because you're just sitting there doing nothing, waiting for something to happen.
Right. Right, and he goes into later on discusses the benefits in regards to being a hunter. And I mean, it made a lot of sense. Like, for me, always being so easily distracted, it's like I'm constantly always trying to look for something. And this might be a silly example, but I'm at TJ Maxx, and you go through that aisle with all the candy and the bags and the crap you don't need to buy. And every time I go through there, I'm constantly looking around, and I'm thinking, man, I'm very rude because I'm not looking at the cashier. When she's speaking to me, I'm thinking to myself, oh, sorry, cashier, that I'm not looking at you. And I guess I'm kind of going on a tangent now, but I feel like there's this constant distraction where I'm constantly having to look around me to see what there is. But it makes sense if you're a hunter, which I'm definitely don't consider myself a hunter, but I've never hunted in my life. But I mean, it makes sense. You're always looking out for the dangers. You're always looking out for that hunt. But yeah, what do you want to add on to that?
Well, I mean, as far as that goes, I don't think that I necessarily qualify as a hunter either. I do a lot of fishing and try to go out and hike as often as I can. And I can definitely say that the distractibility, it can be an asset. I've had instances where I've almost stepped on poisonous snakes, or fallen down certain areas that it looks solid, but I noticed something small which tips me off, and I was able to avoid things like that. That distractibility, it just draws your attention. A lot of people talk about their inability to really pay attention to more than one thing. Yeah, I mean, a lot, like, for instance, like listening to two different sounds at the same time. Like, somebody's talking to you while you're listening to music. It can be very difficult to keep track of both. I think people with ADHD or ADHD symptoms a lot of times are more easily able to just switch between the two. And that was something I think he discussed in the book as well, as switching between tasks.
Yeah, I actually do that a lot in class. I'm that person in class who's like on Candy Crush in the middle of class, and it's not that I'm paying attention, it's just my hands have to be doing something. And which is funny is I'm the one, rudely being on Candy Crush in the middle of a lecture, but I'm also the only one participating. Mm-hmm. But definitely and I noticed too is I'll be sitting down watching TV and I'm like, why am I on my phone? Well, I guess this is probably common with a lot of people. Why are you on your phone? Why are you supposed to be watching this show? But lately I feel like it's getting worse. I can't sit down and watch a show anymore. But
see, my wife can't listen to music and talk to anybody at the same time.
Really?
Really.
So she has a hyper focus.
She's very hyper focused. She cannot deviate from what she's doing. Two sounds at the same time really bothers her because she can't focus on either one. Whereas, like you said, watching TV and actually doing something on your phone, I, for instance, will listen to audiobooks, podcasts, stuff like that all the time while I'm doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to, keep track of the dialogue in the back of my head and actually be able to repeat it was a big plus for me in classes and whatnot. Is how I got through most of them, because I was spending the rest of the time doodling, right?
I did the same thing.
Yeah,
I do a lot of doodling.
I would just, doodle, draw, whatever, I was doing during class. Sometimes I would even write during class that was unrelated. And, whenever you're called on, like, well, what's going on? Why aren't you paying attention? Is able to repeat, the last minute and a half of conversation. So I may not have processed it in the moment, but I was listening and I knew what you were saying.
I have had someone snap at me once in the middle of a meeting. Like, I was doodling, which is what I do to help me. The doodling helps prevent me from daydreaming while someone is talking. And this person snapped at me and was like, put that pencil down. Why aren't you listening? That's so rude. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm sorry. And I put my pencil down. But I'm thinking, afterwards, why did I listen to her? I should have just told her to shut up and went back to doodling. But, yeah, I don't even know the point of me saying that was. But
you got to vent. That's okay.
I got to vent a little bit. Damn her. Should have just let me doodle. Something, though, that I want to point out is just because he says identifies that someone with ADHD as a hunter, does that not mean that you can throw an ADHD person out into a forest and expect them to survive?
Well, I could probably survive.
You
out
could.
in the forest,
Actually, technically, I might be able to.
Yeah,
I was
you were in
forced.
The forest.
Yes, but I was forced a lot as a child to go camping and stuff. I can do it. I just don't like it. Dirt. I don't like dirt. I don't know.
I'm all about dirt.
But I do like that he does point out that if we are raised at a young age to be hunters, then yes, we'll be well adapted to do it. But throwing, a 30-some-year-old with ADHD who's never hunted out into the forest does not mean we're going to be hunters.
Well, I mean, when you look at sports settings, right, you have your, your reliable, same kind of, able to do that same thing over and over, right? I don't know enough about sports to really highlight anything, but I can say that when you have your, your mavericks out there, a lot of time it's those people who are trying different things and they're practicing the same thing. The distractibility, I think he also addresses it. It comes with short periods of hyper focus, where you practice those same skills over and over again, or really focus on learning a particular thing. And when you do that, you gain the ability to really access that knowledge without having to consciously work at it, right? So making a free throw, right? You don't make your free throw on the first attempt when you're a rookie. You practice it over and over and over again until that motion becomes natural, and you know that when you stand at that line and you throw it this way, it's going to go in. Right? So, I mean, practicing those hunter skills over and over again as you grow up is definitely going to make you able to use those skills and being able to access them on that moment's notice with that same drive to just take the next action that you have when you have people with ADHD. I think that would be extremely beneficial.
So sleeping, he does go into ADHD sleep. I do have, and this is, so I do, I have my ADHD Facebook group. I have my ADHD Clubhouse group. All of us are night people.
Of course.
All of us have horrible sleep schedules. But he goes into that. He discusses why it's hard for us to fall asleep, why we stay up late. Even goes into, why we wake up after, a couple hours of sleep. And, he discusses how basically it's a way for us to be able to wake up in a hostile environment and make sure that we can wake up and protect ourselves, right? If you're living in the forest and some,
Yeah, and you have to be on guard for predators and whatnot, especially in smaller groups. You don't have the opportunity to rotate shifts.
Yeah.
I personally have had, years and years of times where if I'm going to sleep at a certain time, I'll wake up reliably every night around 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, depending on what my schedule is. But and that time just can't get back to sleep. So you go out, you walk around, you do something, go back to bed when you're ready.
I do notice too that when I'm not trying to be healthy and exercise and eat healthy, I rely a lot on sugar and carbs. I guess carbs turn into sugar, whatever, but sugar and breads to help me actually fall asleep. When I'm eating healthy, it can take me up to 3 hours to fall asleep, and then I wake up every couple hours. Like, that is my natural state of being. But I was really glad when I read this. I was really glad. Oh, thank God, it's not just me, and there's a reason for it, because I'm supposed to be protecting myself from mountain lions.
There you go.
But you did mention earlier, well, not earlier in the podcast, but a few minutes ago before we started, about how reading this helps your sleep.
Yeah, so he talked a lot about, or a bit about sleep hygiene during the book and what that meant. And I mean, for those of you who don't know, sleep hygiene is the idea that you keep your sleeping area separate from your wakeful area. And if you can do that, that means that your mind associates going to bed with sleeping, which makes it a lot easier. And, in the past, I've had issues actually being able to get to sleep. You sit there and you worry about getting enough sleep or everything else, or you worry about something that's going on during the day. But either way, like, after listening to the book and thinking, okay, so what if I just don't go to the room until I'm ready to sleep, and then I can just spend time, working on my, laptop out in the living room, or watching something, reading a book, whatever it is. Just do something out there until I feel about ready. It's usually around the same time now. It's not too much variation at this point, but around that time, just go to bed, and it takes maybe 10 minutes rather than the normal hour and a half, 2 hours.
I always tell myself to start doing that, and I never end up doing it. I end up in bed playing on my phone, which I guess I should just put the phone away, but
that's the thing, is it?
But then I just lie there thinking about my phone, which is a horrible habit. I need a break, but it's probably never going to happen.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, is that was a definite issue as well. It's like, mm-hmm. I would sit there and I would just read something on my phone. Now I just don't feel the urge to. When I go to bed, I just plug my phone in and able to just go to sleep. It's not, it's just I don't associate it with using my phone anymore. So I definitely feel that there was some value to that. It definitely helped me out anyway. Maybe
one day I'll do it. Probably not. I probably will never do it. I will probably just be a miserable night person trying to go to sleep at 10 o'clock at night.
Now, see, the downside is that my main computer is right next to the bed. So every time I sit in the computer chair, I'm like getting ready to nod off while I'm doing whatever I need to do. So that's definitely an issue. I may have to relocate the computer.
Yeah. So, something I do want to mention is it's very common. And for those of us with ADHD, we hear it a lot. We'll say, "Oh, I have such and such symptoms," and people are like, "Oh, I have that," or "Oh, you just need to focus more." I like that he gave the list and the description of symptoms, in addition to tying them to hunter habits. But I think this was also great because he gave descriptions of how ADHD is more than just focus problems, how it's time perception, disorganization.
Time perception is definitely something to explore.
Yes. And it's funny because I just saw a meme on Facebook where it's is it Ralph on The Simpsons?
Yeah.
So Ralph's sitting in a booth and they're like, and it's like, left early so I wouldn't have anxiety about being late. Now I have anxiety about being too early. And I definitely have that problem. I'm either late to something or I'm really early to something. And I have that exact problem now I'm sitting here waiting for 15 minutes for something to start and I have anxiety that I'm the only one dumb person here alone sitting here waiting. Or I'm in my car running late because I had to stop at Starbucks and it took longer than I had planned.
Yeah. I think you mentioned it today. You just planned for me to be late now. Normally, I am, wherever I need to be about half an hour early and just sitting there feeling awkward.
I would do the same thing. Or I had dinner with a friend of mine and we had made plans. to meet up like at 1 or something, and I get a text message at her at 1:15. Hey, what time are we supposed to meet up? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm gonna be a few minutes late. I'm like, that is okay because I know you have ADHD, and I was expecting you to be late. And I was even telling my daughter, it's okay, honey. She has ADHD. We were expecting this. But yes, this whole perception of time is like, if something does not have to be done now at this moment, then it's pushed off. And
procrastination,
a lot of procrastination, but it's always a sense of now. Mm-hmm. And when I don't have something to do, I'm freaking out because I feel like I have to do something now. Because there's always something that needs to get done.
Oh yeah, of course.
There's no scheduling things. Oh, I'll do this tomorrow at 2:00. No, in my head it's now. Get it done now. There is no later.
Yeah. See, I have this issue at work a lot lately. It's just that, there are times when 20 minutes feels like 2 hours.
Yes.
And other times when it feels like 5 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. So it's, I have a bit of an issue spacing my workout to a manageable rate. I tend to just do everything all in the first 5 minutes. And then I'm like, okay, so now I guess I wait.
Yeah, and then you're freaking out like you forgot something.
Mm-hmm. So then I end up
it's like a panic
to find out more and more things to add on to the list, and that ends up being an issue where I'm running 3 or 4 projects at the same time,
and it has to get done now. Yeah, so there's no present. It's just what he says, linear flow of time. Normal people have a linear flow of time. There's no linear flow of time with me. It's either right now or, not for another year.
Well, I think Einstein said that time was an illusion or a stubbornly persistent illusion or something like that. So, to paraphrase at least. I think he mentioned in the book, did he mention Einstein at all?
I don't remember. I don't think so. If he actually might have. There was a whole chapter at the end with famous people who probably had ADHD. But I'm going to be honest, it was probably the most boringest chapter out of this whole book. Like, out of all the information he gave, it's a great book. Highly recommend you go get it. But that last chapter, I just kind of skimmed through because that's when my ADHD kicked in. I was like,
It did feel like it was largely opinion based there for me. Like
the last chapter?
Yeah. So it's like, well, this person probably had ADHD because X, Y, Z. And then it's, well, none of us lived at that point in time. There's no real way for us to tell for sure. So it felt very unnecessary. It was good information if it was true, but the problem is that right?
If it was true,
we don't really know whether any of them had ADHD. As far as I'm aware, I mean, if there is any science that I'm unaware of, I'm happy to learn about it. But I don't think of any. I can't think of any way for them to be able to tell whether or not these people did have ADHD other than diagnosis at the time, which didn't happen.
No, I mean, I don't even know if there was ADHD.
Back then,
I was like, was there an actual...
It wasn't a disorder at the time.
It was a disorder at the time, yeah. Today we discuss ADHD, A Hunter in a Farmer's World by Thom Hartmann. I encourage you to look him up. Great Twitter feed, Facebook feed, has videos on political topics, multiple books out there. I got my book off of Amazon.
I got mine on Audible. I'd spent a lot of time listening to my books, so it worked out great for me.
I think I will soon be switching to Audible. We are not sponsored by Audible.
No, we're not. But
we're just busy people.
I definitely like Audible, and it always it allows me to do more than one thing, which kind of fits into the theme here.
That is true. We do multiple things at one time. But once again, we were discussing ADHD, A Hunter in a Farmer's World by Thom Hartmann. If you would like to leave a comment for us, please do so either on Twitter or Instagram. Thank you all for listening. Distribution of Anthropotamus is in collaboration with the American Anthropological Association. Please continue to follow us on Instagram and Twitter @Anthropotamus for our latest episodes, show notes, and book discussion schedule.